Kick it.
Ahoy, mateys, and welcome to This Week in Nickelodeon History. I'm, of course, your host, Captain Eric, and on this episode, we're going to celebrate some Nickelodeon anniversaries that have took place in between the times of August 21st to August 27th. And I really hope that by the time this episode airs, I hope that there is some good news out of THQ of not only SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake, but I hope there is some semblance of an announcement of any other Nicktoon-related games that they can bring back from the past. I have no idea why there hasn't been a compilation of sorts of old Nickelodeon games with some quality of life improvements like a rewind feature and save states and whatnot. Look at the re-release of those Disney classic games or the Disney Afternoon Collection that you can find digitally. I don't know why Disney does it, but Nickelodeon does not, but I have fingers crossed all the time just for a nice, easy compilation of some classic Nickelodeon games. But speaking of some classic Nickelodeon games, just so you know, we're starting out 20 years ago on August 25th, 2002. We had the short-lived Nickelodeon Robot Wars. Based on the original concept of Robot Wars by Tom Gooderidge and Stephen Casey, this show was presented by Dave Azer and only ran for 6 episodes, lasting until October 6th, 2002. I am a big fan of the concept of Robot Wars, and anytime it was on any kind of channel, whether or not it was Spike TV, TNN, Nickelodeon, wherever you can find Robot Wars, I was going to watch it. The concept of people building robots specifically for battle. And in that regard, you could battle these robots in so many different ways because every single robot did something different. It would have a unique aspect to it that it would bring to the fight. The people making these robots would know the arenas they're bringing these things to, so would keep those in mind and would come up with a wide variety of different kinds of weapons that these robots could unleash onto their opponents. And it was a genuinely fun experience to watch. I just don't know if the Nickelodeon audience was the right one for it, but I'm glad it was here. I'm glad it aired once, and then it would continually air on the Nick Gas channel. But for those that don't know, that's not a Nickelodeon channel devoted to farts. The Nickelodeon Gas channel was games and sports and was the re-airing hub of all of Nickelodeon's content of the live-action game show variety. 25 years ago, on August 24th, 2007, we had the final episode of Danny Phantom. Created by Butch Hartman, the show ran for 3 seasons of 53 episodes. One of my favorite Nicktoons of all time. I would say it's my second favorite behind SpongeBob. And in the idea of continuity coming into play in a certain serialized format, it's among one of my favorites. I would even say in that regard, I prefer it a little bit more than Avatar. Although that is simply a personal preference in regards to superheroes, though I always tell people that Avatar: The Last Airbender is the greatest story that Nickelodeon could ever put it in a bow, tie in a knot, and hand off and say, here you go, here's a complete package. But right behind that, in my opinion, is Danny Phantom. It's a show that has stood the test of time. And the final episode, Phantom Planet, certainly a series finale that we don't get with many Nicktoons. And maybe that's the reason why they didn't want to really properly air this series out. Because by the 3rd season of Danny Phantom, something was happening behind the scenes at Nickelodeon. This show was incredibly popular, but was never really given the fair shake at Nickelodeon, in my opinion. They certainly had cross-promotions with Danny Phantom with a wide variety of products. There was a Danny Phantom ice cream bar at one point, so it's not like they didn't try to advertise the show. Although there was a severe lack of merchandise for Danny Phantom beyond some of these co-promotions. I mean, for years as a fan, PHAN, I had the cans of SpaghettiOs and the one puzzle I could find, along with an advertisement for the ice cream bar, as my only Danny Phantom merchandise. Then at one point, they smartly released the Danny Phantom logo as a t-shirt at Hot Topic, which I'm such a fan of Danny Phantom, I actually wore as a part of my senior photo shoot for high school. Yeah. And I graduated in 2009, so I kept that love of Danny Phantom even a few years after it ended. The amount of merchandise for this show is scarce in the long run. Now these days, there's no shortage of Danny Phantom merchandise being released through places like Hot Topic and Boxed Lunch, which is great and all as a fan of the show, but I wish there was more merchandise released at the time of the show being on the air so that as a fan I could say, hey, take my money, this show is worth making more of. And it's not like Nickelodeon didn't have Danny Phantom as a big part of their network. They had no problem in advertising any of the TV movies that Danny Phantom had cooking up throughout its first 2 seasons, but that 3rd season was an absolute mess. As mentioned in a previous Squarecast episode, I recorded, I think, earlier today, but it aired, I don't know, next week or at some point, but I brought up the Urban Jungle episode of the 3rd season. It's like the 4th or 5th episode of the season, and there's certain continuity bits that happen in those first few episodes that are crucial to the plot of this episode that Nickelodeon just said, well, we need a Danny Phantom special. We have this one with Mark Hamill coming in as the villain. Let's promote it as a big event. And they just aired it. And it like aired out of order. And us fans all were like, what? What's going on with these other characters? And it's a mess. And the rest of the 3rd season was then just held by Nickelodeon for months. The fans knew it was done. We had ideas on all the episodes. I remember being on the Butch Hartman forums at the time, like trying to find information as to when this season would air, and everybody was just losing their minds. Eventually, Nickelodeon would just batch release the 3rd season in 2 separate week-long events known as Phantom Mania. Phantom Mania 1 aired the first half of the season, and then a few weeks later, during the summertime, Phantom Mania 2 would air, airing the last part of the season, including the finale, Phantom Planet, which was a TV movie in its own right. It was great to finally get these episodes, but I really wish there was a proper build-up, a week after week build-up of this show. I just felt like it was robbed of that and just kind of thrown out there. Like, oh, you want it? Here you go. And just thrown at the fans so quickly that, like, beggars can't be choosers. If you're begging for the season, you take it or leave it, but it just mismanaged by the end. Really mismanaged. And great potential with Danny Phantom, even in the future. Even with the continuity as is at the end of Phantom Planet, they could continue that show moving forward. There's so much potential in other kind of ghost parodies that were so evident throughout the series. They touched upon so many different fictional ghosts and other haunted supernatural shows, but I mean, even the show Supernatural, that has so much room to be parodied within Danny Phantom. I would love to see a return in some regard, even a Paramount Plus TV movie. They successfully have brought back Beavis and Butthead, so I think Danny Phantom could be the next one in line for a proper comeback. If you have a favorite Danny Phantom episode, a favorite character, I would love to know about it and discuss it in the comments below. Of course, if you're listening to this on YouTube. If you're not, well, then you're going to have to suffer in your car or with your headphones or however you're listening to this and not answer in and discuss this. But if you'd like to, just click the link for the Captain Eric YouTube channel right in the podcast description. That'll take you over right where you can become part of the Ready Crew in a bigger way where you can actually interact and discuss things with Captain Eric. 24 years ago, on August 23rd, 2008, we also had the final episode of ChalkZone. Created by Bill Burnett and Larry Huber, the show ran for 4 seasons of 40 episodes. This one's really cool because recently I got my hands on an actual bona fide Snap action figure. Snap being Rudy's main buddy in the show, the main Chalk character that we met all the way back on Oh Yeah Cartoons, being the very first segment that aired. ChalkZone was the opening segment for Oh Yeah Cartoons on July 19th, 1998. Rudy Tabooty and Snap are technically 90s Nicktoons. At least the younger version of Rudy and Snap. But yeah, I recently got my hands on this little figure of Snap released through Wendy's in their kids' meal. I believe from 2003, 2004. But I just came across it online, and I, for the life of me, couldn't think of any other ChalkZone merchandise to exist. So I now have Snap proudly sitting on the shelf behind me. And it's really nice because I love ChalkZone. It's one of the most interesting Nicktoons to exist, both visually and in their storytelling. Certainly even from the Oh Yeah cartoon shorts, that beyond the Fairly Odd Parents, it was evident that ChalkZone was an obvious winner in the hearts of kids. When you brought up Oh Yeah cartoons on the playground, there was only two of those cartoons that you would hear constantly, and it was the Fairly Odd Parents and it was ChalkZone. Of course, you would have a few other loves for some Oh Yeah cartoon one-offs. But yeah, it was mainly those two that you would hear from people of, I want to see more of that. And while the first season of ChalkZone was finished by 1999 for executive reasons, was not aired until 2002, March 22nd, 2002 to be exact. And let me tell you, there was a lot of weird executive decisions going on around this era of Nickelodeon. I covered it a bit with Danny Phantom in that third season. Well, a lot of these other Nicktoons are no stranger to weird airings and just jumbled messes by their second, third, or fourth seasons. A lot of these Nicktoons by this era, by their third season, things would just go off the rails. And you find it all the time. My Life as a Teenage Robot, ChalkZone, Danny Phantom. Then eventually things would get worse, where even halfway through a show's second season, it would just get dumped onto Nicktoons Network. It would happen way too often. But ChalkZone here was just a mismanaged mess, with a ton of the episodes just not airing for years on Nickelodeon until 2008, which was 3 years after they had announced that the show would be canceled. It took them 3 years to air 6 remaining episodes, or a certain batch of them. It's beside me. I don't understand why throughout this entire time Nickelodeon didn't have a concrete animation block where they could constantly put in new episodes of new shows. And, Fox got this done, Cartoon Network has this done, every other channel that has big animation has big blocks, and Nickelodeon has done it before, but then they would always find different and new methods to air new episodes, including, hey, let's just put them on at 6 a.m. Let's see who's watching during that time. I have no idea. I love ChalkZone. If you have never experienced ChalkZone, don't even go back and watch the Oh Yeah cartoon ones, because throughout the first season of ChalkZone, they basically rehash all of those shorts. So if you go back and watch those first and then go into the series, you're going to be rewatching a lot of those classic shorts. So just start with the first season of ChalkZone. I think it's enjoyable to go back and rewatch it. I think you'll find something with it. I at least hope you do. 13 years ago, on August 24th, 2009, we had the premiere of the Fresh Beat Band. Created by Scott Kraft and Nadine Vandervelde, the show ran for 3 seasons, 60 episodes, and 1 standalone special. 11 years ago, on August 24th, 2013, the Nickelodeon TV movie Swindle premiered on Nickelodeon. To an audience of over 4.2 million viewers, this movie was built on the back of a bunch of pre-existing live-action Nickelodeon stars, including Noah Crawford, Chris O'Neill, Jeanette McCurdy, Noah Munich, and Ariana Grande, who of course were just advertised ad nauseum in starring this movie. So I am not surprised at all that a massive number of viewers tuned in for this movie, because it was built as almost Nickelodeon's answer to Ocean's 11. Like, here's a spy-ish kind of heist movie, but with a bunch of known Nickelodeon stars of the time. And if you have any memories of it, if you recommend it, I haven't seen it personally, but if you think it's worth a watch, definitely let me know. 7 years ago, on August 24th, 2015, we had the premiere of Shimmer and Shine. Created by Farnaz and Nashari Sharmat, the show ran for 4 seasons of 86 episodes. 5 years ago, on August 21st, 2017, we had the premiere of Sunny Day. Created by Abby Longstaff, the show ran for 2 seasons of 60 episodes. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to make it for this week in Nickelodeon history. But as always, it's time for Captain Eric's Top 5, with this week's Top 5 being all about my Top 5 ChalkZone episodes. If you've never watched ChalkZone, I'm going to tell you my Top 5 here. But in particular, if you have never seen ChalkZone, then I suggest you check out the first episode of Season 1, Rudy's First Adventure. Start it out proper. Get through that whole thing, and then dive into these top 5 here. Starting out with number 5, off of Season 3, The Big Blow-Up. The ChalkZone TV movie, technically, is a 2-part episode about what happens when a disease introduced into ChalkZone basically blows up any character made of chalk within an hour of the infection. And yeah, it's a big deal going on. Number 4 is another Season 3 episode, Water, Water Everywhere, Episode 4 of Season 3. What happens when Rudy opens up a portal into the real world from a water source in the chalk world, where chalk water is now pouring into the real world and causes an absolute mess, and apparently also has a bit of an effect on grown-ups when they come into contact with this chalk water. Certainly an exciting episode, just as exciting as my next episode, another Season 3 episode, and I swear, my last one of Season 3, I must have just really liked moments of Season 3. Indecent Exposure, Episode 8 of Season 3, and it's about a reporter coming into terms with the existence of ChalkZone and planning to bring the news to the outer world, which is a fear I had in the back of my head as a fan of this show for Rudy since the beginning. Like, how easy is it going to be for somebody to come across one of these entrances to the chalk world that you leave open, or if you accidentally come out of a chalkboard in public or whatnot? It was always an option on the table, and we finally got one here in Season 3. Though my number 2 episode, I'm going to pull all the way back from Season 1, and it's the classic Wiggies episode, part of, I think it's the first half of the 3rd episode of Season 1, in which this force of nature within the chalk world, the Wiggies, who actually feast on human hair, exist. And Rudy accidentally unleashes these Wiggies, these like frog-looking creatures, into the real world, where they start devouring everyone's hair. And it is certainly a hairy situation to find yourself in if you were Rudy to Booty. And as far as my number 1 favorite episode of ChalkZone, it's not my favorite episode of this character in particular, but I love this episode for introducing him in the first place. And I am talking about Episode 6 of Season 1 of ChalkZone, The Scrawl. A character that is introduced as the main antagonist, or the overarching antagonist of Rudy to Booty's adventures. A character that was accidentally created through an amalgam of means through many kids, and then erased into ChalkZone through Rudy to Booty's hands. And this character absolutely despises Rudy along with all of his creations. And just the introduction of this character is so cool and unique that episode to me just stands the test of time. There are other episodes in which Scrawl's plan certainly is more interesting than the one he has here, but this episode is just so iconic that I can't not constantly go back to it. And even for me personally, saying like I might prefer another Scrawl one, this one is just, it's just so good. It's a chef's kiss of a moment. We had Snap introduced as like the greatest creation of Rudy. So what happens on the other side of that coin? Who considers themselves the worst creation of Rudy to Booty? And the answer for that is possibly the Scrawl. Maybe it's more of a subjective question, but that is going to be it, mateys, for this week in Nickelodeon history. I appreciate our time together, and I appreciate you coming aboard. Apparently, and I was told, this show is number 26 in terms of TV and film podcasts in Indonesia. So if you are listening out there in Indonesia, just want you to know that the captain is over here tipping my hat to you, raising his glass for a toast. Thank you. If I'm at 26 who's to say I can't make it to 25? But if you would like to send Captain Eric a message, a comment, or a suggestion for the show, you can reach me at nickelodeonhistory@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at I'm Ready Podcast and on Instagram at SpongeBob Podcast. Please check out my other podcast, I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast, dropping every Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe to the Captain Eric YouTube channel, where you can also hit that bell so you can be notified anytime the Captain puts something out. You can also purchase new and updated merch at the Redbubble link, either in the podcast description or in the link from any of my socials. Anything that comes in through my projects go directly back into my projects, and it is always appreciated. As always, members of the Ready crew, thank you for coming aboard. Please stay safe, be kind to one another, and come aboard again next week for another episode of This Week in Nickelodeon History.
On the Lord Hut, here a hut, Nick. On the Lord Hut, here a hut, Nick, Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living #1 Nickelodeon.